So we're going to go through this material that's in the book. I'm going to summarize a lot of it. I'm going to add some more things. So for those of you who have read it. And then we're going to do it in 3 parts. So we're going to do part 1 tonight, the last 2 parts tomorrow, and then the last lecture I'm going to work on you guys with my new material, which is going to go presumably in the sequel, which is about morality, which a lot of people ask about. So what are we doing? Why did I write this book? I think that we have a problem in secular Western culture where we sort of have, this is the way I've been putting it recently, we sort of have 2 religions in the secular West. We have an implicit religion and we have an explicit religion. So your explicit religion, I assume most everyone here is Orthodoxy. But you have this other implicit religion that's hidden behind the surface that you get catechized to into the culture itself, which is secularism. Right? And you see all these people here. And the problem that I encounter when I teach catechism, when I was teaching undergraduates at university, is that we have both of those religions kind of competing in us. We have the subconscious, implicit religion of secularism. We'll say more about that. And then we have this explicit thing we're trying to do. We're trying to be good Orthodox Christians, but these are always in conflict, and it's hard to tell when they're in conflict, especially if you are a convert to Orthodoxy. Converts to Orthodoxy? Okay, there we go. Me too. So the analogy I give at the beginning of the book is that when St. Patrick evangelized Ireland, the Irish became Christian, but they still practice all of these pagan things, like praying to the god of the sea when they went sailing. And they didn't think of themselves as being anything other than pious Christians, but a lot of times they thought, well, just in case. It was so deep in their culture that they still did something like that. And you today would see that as a contradiction, and that's very silly, and how could they have such cognitive dissonance? But my assertion to you is that we all do the same thing all of the time, and we don't realize it, because when you live in a culture, that culture catechizes you. And I think that, therefore, we're in the same kind of position with sacramental Christianity, and maybe we're in a worse position, actually, perhaps. Because if you came from a Protestant or Catholic background, we already think of ourselves as Christian. So we think, oh yeah, I'm Christian. And so that the former tradition contains all these things that, on scrutiny, are very antithetical to the faith, but they hide under the hood because we think of ourselves as Christian. I'm from America. America has made this way. United States, Christian nation, and the more I look at it, the more I just don't really see how to square that, but that's very deep in our cultural mythology. So that creates another set of blunders. So what we're going to do, and what I do with this book, I'm going to assume nothing. I'm going to go all the way back to the most very basics and ask very basic questions that you might think are silly, but they need to be asked, and they need to be recontextualized. I wrote this book as a piece of trivia. I wrote this book for undergraduates at the Catholic University of America on the East Coast in Washington, D.C. And they knew nothing about religion, and I had to teach intro to theology and cover all of this stuff for them. What I found is that you could say the what, Christ has 2 natures, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, have one essence, blah, blah, blah. But the why, they just stare at you. They think, okay, so what? Who cares? And so what I realized is that the imagination needs a kind of catechism. You need to think in ways that allow these things to make sense at all, even before they can be life-giving, which of course is the goal. So let's start at the beginning. What is Christianity? And I point this out. This is the first sentence in the book. I say, Christianity did not start with a book. It started with a man, with Jesus. And this is such an important thing that I ended up having to address, because everybody talks about the Bible. Well, my parenting philosophy, my budgeting strategy, my marriage paradigm is biblically based. And what does that mean? What does this text have to do with my life? There's 2 religions of the book. I always say this to catechumens: Islam and Rabbinic Judaism. Christianity is not a religion of the book. There was no book. For the first several decades of Christianity, there was no New Testament. It took decades for all that text to be written. it took centuries for all of these texts to be compiled into something like the canon of Scripture. Centuries. So what were the Christians doing that whole time? You know, if you start from the Bible as the starting point for the religion, then it's strange. It seems like those Christians for the first few centuries weren't Christians. How do they know what to do? How do they know how to worship? How do they know how to pray? They didn't have the text of Scripture the way that we have it. They certainly didn't have it bound in a single volume. That came much, much, much later. They had all kinds of books everywhere. You know, once they had the books, there's a book of the epistles and a book of the Gospels and the Psalms, and they had a completely different way of relating to these texts. What did they have? They had the community founded by the apostles. So the analogy that I give is that Christianity was much more like a family, in that the life of that family is something you enter into. And how long are we going with this first one, Father?
Well, we've rented the hall for life.
You're stuck here.
But you could talk for 45 minutes or an hour and then answer questions.
Sure.
Until you're exhausted, that'd be great.
I'm already exhausted. Is that Gosh, I just need to know. Thank you. When you wanted to become a Christian, they didn't hand you a set of texts. You discipled to somebody. We say all these Christian buzzwords, discipleship, ministry, whatever, but literally you went to somebody and that person brought you into the church and you went to the liturgy. You went and you were involved in the community. You learned how to be in this community. And the analogy I use is like a family. You marry into a family, you don't know these people. They're just your in-laws, you know, and they have an alien foreign life to you. And then over time, you start to pick up on things that are in the family. You learn their jokes, you learn their way of speaking, you learn the rhythm of this family, you learn, okay, well, we don't pick fights with this uncle, we don't, you know. And then you wake up 10 years later and it's your family. You know, you've contributed to the family, you've become a part of it. It's a living thing that has its own spirit to it. And that spirit in that family is something that gets passed down from generation to generation by living people. Now, you could look at a family, and if you had all of their, let's say, text messages or diary entries or videos or whatever, if you had all kinds of text and documentation, you might be able to study all of that very diligently, and you could perhaps learn everything about that family, and you could repeat their jokes, you could imitate their life, you could do reenactment of a family through text. But unless you enter into that family, you're not really a part of it. You can't become part of a family by just reading people's diary entries. Does that make sense? So it's something you have to enter into. You're going to hear this word a lot. I say participatory. Participatory meaning something you enter into and participate in. That is essentially what the life of the church is. But if you think about it, you realize that's everything. Everything in life is like this. You hang out with a certain group of people, you start talking like that. You know, every friend group, every group at school, and within a classroom at a university, at a job, we all get kind of absorb each other's personality and energy and rhythm. You even absorb people's worldviews sometimes if you're around them, right? So that's what life is like, and that's what the church is like. It's like a family that you have to enter into and understand from the inside, not from the outside through text. That's why it's so central to us that God didn't send us a book. He sent a man. And that man didn't write anything down. He made disciples. They walked around with him for 3 years. He transferred his life to them, his whole way of being, in person. And they did that to their disciples. And they did that to their disciples. And here we are. So something, though, that when you do sit down and you read the text that community left, you notice they're always talking about something mysterious that's going on underneath everything. They talked about the life that they lived in a particular way. We would call it a sacramental way now. What does sacrament mean? It's a Latin word. It's a translation of the Greek word mysterion, or mystery. So they're always talking about the secret life of the Christian in terms of mystery. And they use all sorts of language for this. a lot of the imagery, weirdly to us maybe, was sexual imagery. They talked about it in terms of a bride awaiting the bridegroom, or awaiting your wedding night, or a wedding feast. This kind of wedding and sexual imagery is all over the New Testament and the Old Testament, with reference to your integration into the church and your relationship with Christ. And I think that when you kind of put yourself into the headspace of somebody who's in the ancient world, in these traditional cultures, you would have been allowed virtually no unsupervised time with the opposite sex. Everything would be chaperoned. And so when you're waiting for your wedding night, could be your first kiss, in the sense that we kind of romanticize that now, but your first sexual experience, everything is brand new, and so you have no idea what this is going to be like. It's a totally new kind of life that you're entering into, and you can't be prepared for it through words. Words can't prepare you for this, because there's all these mysteries involved. There's the intimacy with the husband or wife. There's children, that's a whole mystery, and the in-laws, that's a mystery too. All of these things that you cannot understand from the outside. The only way to get it is by entering into it. And I emphasize this point because if you, you had a bad catechism or something in any tradition, and you ask questions, your Sunday school teacher may have said something like, well, it's a mystery, don't worry about it. And that means you can't understand it, don't try, stop asking questions. And that's not what we mean by the word mystery in Orthodoxy. What we mean by the word mystery is this thing that I'm talking about, this participatory mode. You can know it, but only from the inside. You have to enter into it first. And again, if you think about life, anything in your life, you know that you know things from the inside. There's all these things that you know that you can't prove. You can't just demonstrate on a piece of paper. But you know them because you're a part of it. You're a part of families, you're a part of jobs. I always joke, I waited tables in high school. Every waiter is like somebody who's from the same veteran from the same war. That's the restaurant industry. And you talk to people, they're like, yeah, I know. And people who don't, they don't get it. And that's everything. That's everything. Now, here's the problem that we have. Modern Christians, by and large, don't talk about their religion in these kind of terms. They don't talk about the mysteries. They don't talk about it in terms of participation. They really kind of, if I were to overgeneralize a little bit, I always say this on the podcast, I'm underpaid to overgeneralize. And my friend came up with this, and I was like, yeah, that's right. If I were to overgeneralize a little bit, I'd say there's two. There's two general categories that we could kind of classify what I'm calling modern Christians. We'll talk more about what I mean by modern Christians tomorrow, but two general categories. One is what you would call a text-based kind of Christian, what's sometimes called fundamentalism, which is the idea I just said that we're not, which is they think that the religion is fundamentally about a text. You get this text like a message in a bottle. God sends the text to us, and then we study the text very diligently, and that's how we know how to be Christians. And there's so many problems with this. I mean, if you're a convert to Orthodoxy, you're probably already there. It's worth saying, though, which is the texts can't interpret themselves. That's the problem with texts. That's one of our Western fixations, is that we think that texts and methods can be self-interpreting, and if you just follow the procedures, you'll be fine. Follow the procedures. Maybe, yeah. This manifests in every area of our life. Westerners want to proceduralize everything, make everything into an algorithm. Everything is an engineering problem. And that's how we relate to these texts. And of course, the problem with this is that it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. And you could have all sorts of arguments about this with your Protestant friends or whatever. But to me, the most basic kind of practical realization is that before the Reformation, we sort of had 2.5 denominations of Christianity, if you even want to call it that. The word denomination really doesn't apply in that context. You get Orthodox, Catholic, and Coptic. It's sort of 2.5. And then the Reformation comes along and they say, well, the problem is we haven't been relying on the text in the right way. That's the problem. And then now we have 30 to 50,000 denominations of Christianity. And so to me, just from a very basic perspective, if the problem was that the text of Scripture we weren't adhering to the text of Scripture correctly, and that was going to solve problems, that didn't solve the problem. That made a new problem. They have all these denominations that are radically different on all kinds of views. I mean, and another thing people think is that the Reformation, very gradually, many denominations emerged over a long period of time after the Reformation. Not so. Immediately, within Luther's lifetime, you had Unitarians, you had people denying the sacraments, you had people, like, it was just, they were all over the place. They were throwing books out of the Bible. There's groups of people who said no Old Testament. It was all over the place. Within just a few years of Luther's life. Complete madness, and it's never really stopped being anything other than chaotic. And so we've just seen that it sort of doesn't work. Now, the opposite problem that people have, the other category I'm putting them into, is what you might call an individual-based Christianity. So if the first one's a text-based, this one you could call it individual-based. You could call it progressive Christianity, whatever you want to call it. But the idea is that this type of relationship to Christianity says, well, we're not going to have this problem of biblical interpretation. We're going to kind of downplay the role of the Bible and say, the Bible can be inspirational, but it's not a rule book, which is true. And really, the religion is more about being a good person and having love, and you can cherry pick all these things from the Bible, how this is the right way to be. And this kind of individual-based Christianity tends to reveal itself as whatever the morality of the times is, meaning people who fall into these denominations will just, their moral structure will be the same as whatever the culture around them is. There is no real counterculture, it's just kind of an extension of secularism. That's why I call it progressive. And it's difficult to say that this is Christianity in a really literal sense, right? And the analogy I use is, you have a book, there's the book, and you go through it, and anytime you don't like something, cross it out. You add something here, cross it out here, add something there. Maybe I didn't like this chapter. Rip the whole chapter out and just keep going. If you do that at all, it's hard to say that it's the same book, right? It's based on this book, it's inspired by the book, but it's not the same book, and so it's really not the same religion. It's been altered too much. Now, the common denominator between these two things, between the text-based religion and the individual-based religion, is that they're both very modern. And what I mean by that is that ancient Christians would not have thought of their relationship to religion in general in this way. Not because they didn't care about the text. Obviously, they cared about the text of Scripture, covered it in gold and jewels, and held it up in liturgy. Okay, so they care about it. And it's not that they didn't think people's individual experience of life was unimportant. Obviously, they did. But they wouldn't have identified either of those two things as the center of the religion. The center of the religion for them was Christ. Really, though, in a completely intimate way, this way that we talk about when we say the word sacrament. We talk about the mysteries, and we use all this wedding night imagery to talk about it. And this is kind of the whole problem that I identify, is that what it means to be a modern person is to have a very difficult time understanding those categories. You read the Bible, I tell you, being united in Christ is like consummating your marriage. And you're just kind of like, that's weird. That doesn't sit with us. That sounds strange. Why would that be the analogy? And we have to do all these gymnastics to figure out what that exactly means. This kind of stuff would have been very, very intuitive to ancient people. And they wouldn't have really recognized any of the things that many of the things that we do now, they just would not have recognized as religion. It would have been very odd to them. Just like we see the things in the ancient world as very foreign and odd. And that's the problem. And that reveals to you the sort of implicit religion that I'm talking about of secularism. We have a very specific way of viewing the world. In philosophy, we talk about things in terms of categories. You have these categories in your mind that you view everything through. And it's very resistant to sacramental thinking. And so I'm a catechist. If you guys know Father Josiah Trenum, I'm a catechist at his parish. A lot of catechumens. We have 250-something catechumens right now, so we've really got our hands full. Yeah. pray for us. And I work and these people they're beautiful. They are so excited to become Orthodox Christians. And Southern California, very much kind of a seeker, spiritual type of place. Lots of huge Protestant mega churches, lots of people who you would describe as on fire for Christ. It's the whole thing. So they have beautiful intentions. But then they come in and they just don't get what I'm saying, because even if I use the same words, they hear something different. And so, we can talk about this tomorrow if you want to. I say this is a little controversial because I say, look, these are different religions, Protestants and Orthodox. They're just different religions. And the reason you know that they're different religions, and Catholicism too, is when you have to redefine all of the terms in order for them to be used, it's a different religion. It just is. And we can talk about what's the implication. We'll talk about that tomorrow. So that is why we need to be aware that we have these lenses on, and that we don't always know that we have them on. We see the world through these very specific modern categories, but they're invisible to us. The analogy I give in the book is that if you want to get a fish to realize that it lives in the water, like a fish doesn't know it's wet. It's life. If you want to, I stole this from C.S. Lewis. And if you want to get, what are you going to do? If you wanted to realize that it is wet, it has to have two realizations. This is the part I added. It has to have two realizations. One, that yes, it does live in a world of water, but also that there's a whole other world of dry land. So it has to realize both of them at the same time. And so for the modern convert to Orthodoxy, or anyone who even just wants to understand Orthodoxy, you have to have two realizations. You can't just, tell me how the sacramental worldview works. Sure, we'll do that. But you also need to realize what the secular view is, where it came from, and why, and how these two are different, like the dry land and the water. Forgive me, I'm having a constant allergic reaction because my house has mold. That was a big discovery of last 2 weeks. So my wife and daughter are living at my dad's, and we're ripping the bathrooms on. And it turns out I'm allergic to this kind of mold. So, let's start over. Really start over. I had to do this for my freshmen. What is religion? What is religion? Is it something that brings you comfort? Is it the fire insurance that you check the right boxes so you don't go to the bad place? No. And even though those are so common in our psyche, the question of religion is really the answer to the question of ultimate reality. Meaning, what do you think all of this is and why? That's what a religion answers. And every ancient person would have thought that. We talk about religion in terms of all these medicative and consumerist kind of modes. You've heard this term, moral therapeutic deism. Anybody heard this term? Yeah. We used to talk about this over at Catholic. Because you get these people who, it's moral, they're like, it sounds good, it gives me direction for my life. It's therapeutic, so it's primarily a self-help interaction. And it's deism, meaning it's not really the Holy Trinity in Christ, the incarnate God. It's just kind of this watchmaker, and he winds it up, and then you need to, go to therapy. So that's not what religion is. Religion is this kind of ultimate answer to the why of everything, and also the how. And it's important to realize that the why and the how are different questions. This is a point I think is worth touching on. Scientific questions answer the how. How are water molecules formed? How are clouds formed? How are babies formed? And we think that if we know the answer to all the how questions in the world, that it's going to answer the why question. This is kind of the fallacy you see with a lot of these scientists. It doesn't answer the why question. You could know how every individual object in the whole universe was formed. And it still doesn't answer the ultimate question about why, or even, here's a head trip for those less philosophically inclined of you. why does anything exist at all? Like, why are there existing things? You can tell me that this thing evolved into that thing. That doesn't answer the question. Why is there even existence? That's not a scientific question, actually. Ask me about that in Q&A if you're interested. I'm not gonna subject you to some of these philosophy things. Okay, so when I start over with everything, I say, okay, what's religion? It's the answer to the ultimate question. What is reality ultimately about? And it's curious when you ask this question because in every culture, just about every major culture in human civilization, they kind of give the same answer. So it's weird. They have this sense that there's this mysterious power before, behind, underneath, above, everything else. And often they call it, God, or the equivalent in their language. And this is the first problem that I tended to have with students, is that the word God is very ambiguous, actually. Thor is a god. Zeus is a god. St. Paul says, you shall be as gods. Talk about God, uppercase G is God. What are we talking about? This word is ambiguous. It's ambiguous in Greek. It's used in all these different ways in Homer and in the philosophers. It's confusing. So let me sort this out for you. I'm inviting you to use a definition here. So let's talk about two different things. By the word God, let's mean lowercase g. Gods. Zeus is a god. Thor is a god. These are entities which are very powerful. They're superhuman. They govern the world, maybe. They do all these different things. But they're in the world. They're bound by it. They have limitations. If you read the mythologies, a lot of times they can die. They can be killed. That's what I'll mean by God. And if it helps you think of it with the lowercase g. But for the thing Christianity is trying to talk about, let's use a different word. I'm going to use the word arche. I'll see any Greek speakers, I don't think. They get mad at me. It's arche. I got yelled at when I was at a Greek parish. Modern Greek is very different than old Greek. So I'm going to call it arche. And by arche, I mean something that's not the gods in the way we just defined it. The arche is what you might call the ultimate principle of reality. It's the source of all reality. It's something like existence itself or being itself. It's not an existing thing the way you or I exist. It's the source of all existence. So here's the analogy, because that's very abstract, I understand. So here's the analogy. Let's say it's springtime in beautiful British Columbia, which I've experienced, it's glorious. And we go to a park, and we're walking around, there's animals everywhere, and plants and trees, and you say, wow, this park is teeming with life. And I'm feeling smart alecky, and I say to you, okay, if life is here, point to it. And you're like, well, the tree is alive, and the squirrel is alive. And I say, no. Where is life? Point to it. And but this is all life. No. Those things have life. They are alive. But where is life? Where is life itself? Life itself is something that they all share in. It's something that they all have. But the tree and the squirrel and all these things, none of those things is life itself. That's something they participate in. So in the same way, it's the same way with existence. We all exist. This building exists. But none of us are existence itself. Existence itself is the arche. And the Greeks were using this word a long time before this to mean this kind of thing. So ancient pagans, many pagan cultures realized they believed in the gods and all that, but they realized that underneath everything, or above the gods, or however you want to put it, that there was something that was existence itself, that everybody participates in. So when you think about these two different categories, you realize that Thor, or Zeus, is in the same category with you, or a dog, or a rock, or whatever. All the things that have existence. Then there's this other mysterious thing that is existence. And again, many pagans thought this was fine. They were on board with a single principle for reality. And curiously, another weird commonality, cultures that believed in this idea also believed that that thing was not just existence itself, but morality itself, too. It was goodness itself. So you can do a good thing, same kind of analogy. You can do a good thing, but the good thing is not goodness itself. Where does goodness itself come from? Well, for cultures like the pagan Greeks, the arche was existence itself and goodness itself, too. And they were on board with that. Now, it's not really sounding Christian yet. If that's what you're concerned with, that's right. Many people, but it's important to note that so many pagan cultures already believed in this thing. Because anybody, Aristotle, any thinking civilization realized that logically this has to be the case. When Christianity comes along, and ancient Israelites first of all, although it's not clear to me that they totally understood this concept at first, is that they started interacting with this entity who was not just one of the other gods. Turns out, and I'm not really sure when the ancient Israelites kind of get this fully, if they do, but it's reflected in all the language. They talk about him as the God of the gods, the Lord of the lords. It's clear that they have some sense that he's in this category above the gods. This is part of Deuteronomy where it says, God stands in the congregation of the gods and judges them. So they weren't monotheists. That's something people don't realize. But they didn't believe that Yahweh was in the same category as these other creatures. And so by the time we get to the early church, Christ, etc., it starts to be understood that the arche exists, they accept that, but the Christian kind of twist is that the arche is a person. It has a mind, it has a will. It's not just like a force or something, which a lot of pagans were okay with. They were okay with this idea that it was an impersonal force. But Christians said, no, the arche is a person. Spoiler, it's 3 people, of course, as you guys know that. But the first paradigm shift's hard enough for the pagan, because you have to okay, this thing that's sort of some kind of abstract principle, the force or whatever. No, it actually has a mind, it has a will, it can communicate with you. That's a big deal. And with the Trinity, maybe I'll say this very, very, very quickly with the Trinity part. We could always, there's always one person who wants to get way more into the Trinity than everybody else does. To that person, I love you. We bring it up during Q&A. But the simple thing about the Trinity, so the idea is there's the arche, it's being itself, it's goodness itself. You add to that the idea, it's a person, it's personal, okay. Then the Christian makes this other jump. Yeah, but it's also 3 persons with one essence. And when I explained this to my freshmen, what I realized is that most of them did not really want to understand the mechanics of how the Trinity works. I don't think most people do, because it's very complicated and a lot of ink has been spilled on it over a 1,000-year period, it's blah, blah. Most people don't care about all that. What people want to know, in my experience, is why do I care? Why does this complicated thing that keeps getting hand-waved, why is it the center of the faith? Why is it so important? And the answer is, if God wasn't a Trinity, there'd be no such thing as love. There wouldn't be love. So this is like the ultimate Christian twist. The arche is being itself, it's goodness itself, it's a person, and we say, first people in history, God is love. So when St. John says this, he's not saying God's really loving. Or if you join this religion, you're going to feel all these loving feelings. That's not what he's saying. Maybe those things are true. But he's saying God equals love. Okay, well, what does that mean? So here's a simple way to understand this. Simple as I can make it. This is the most complicated part of the book and the talk. And we get it out of the way and then we move on. But I think it's worth getting at because this is so central. The Trinity is the center of our whole faith. So let's take a step back and look at all these other worldviews again. We're gonna overgeneralize, which I love to. You take all the different religions in the world, and you can kind of group them, worldviews too, even things that don't say that they're religions, but they are. You can kind of group them again into 2 general categories. One category is what you might call worldviews of the one. And what that means is these worldviews believe that everything is ultimately one. It's called monism, if you know that word. Where, you and I may appear to be different, but the reality is that we all belong to this kind of single divine consciousness, and the goal of religion is to kind of melt away into this divine absolute one. The Hinduism is a good modern example of an old religion that's like that. Many ancient Greek faith systems were based on this idea that everything's ultimately part of one thing. And then you have what's the opposite, which is the worldview of the many. And that's what secularism believes in, which is that every person is a completely separate individual. You come into the world as your own little individual. You can make contracts or alliances or relationships with people. But ultimately, first and last, you're your own separate person. And you need to be your own separate person, because that's how you're you. I'm me because I'm not you, and I'm not you, and you're you because you're not me. We have all this distinction. So the analogies I give are, worldview of the one is like water. The one, the arche in this worldview, is like a big ocean, and you're all water droplets. And you've been separated from the ocean, and your goal is to go back into it. But when you take that drop of water and you put it back into the ocean, that drop is gone. You can't get it back out. And that's why kind of persons don't really exist on a worldview of the many. In Hinduism, everyone's just kind of an emanation of the one. And then for the worldview of the many, people are like rocks. They're all separate. You can stack them up to make a wall, maybe put some mortar in between it, but you can't really combine them the way you can with water droplets. They're totally separate. And this rock is this rock. It's not that rock. Okay, now you're asking, why are we talking about this? Because the problem is, on either of these two worldviews, it's not clear where love fits in. Because in a worldview of the one, if we're all just water droplets and we all melt back into the one, how does the sentence, I love you, make any sense? Because there's not really an I and there's not really a you. The I and you are literally the same thing. We're all just the ocean. G.K. Chesterton, if there's any fans here, he criticizes this worldview and he says, it's like the whole universe is one giant person giving itself a hug. There's no I and you on that worldview. So the sentence, I love you, you need an I and a you for that sentence to make sense. Okay, well, what about a worldview of the many? Everyone's distinct individuals on the worldview of the many. We're completely separate. There's an I and there's a you. Got it. Well, the problem on that worldview is it's not clear what the verb is doing in the middle. I love you. What does that mean on a worldview where we're all radical individuals? Well, it means I'm having a particular emotional experience of you, and I really hope you're having the same one back with me, but you've been up around the block, you know that those things don't have to line up. All unrequited love and all that kind of stuff. So, on a worldview of the many, love just kind of means an individual emotional experience that you're having of this or that person or whatever. It's not clear what we share in common for those to be the same. So Christianity blows all this up by saying that at the center of all reality, the source of all being, is this thing, the Holy Trinity, which is both one, God, and three persons. One and many together. And this is important because it's got all the features of the worldview of the one and the worldview of the many together. It's the best of both. Because there's three separate persons in the Trinity. There can be an I and a you. I, the Father, and you, the Holy Spirit, whatever. But because they have the same essence, their love is sheer. It's the same love. They really do share something that is completely, intimately the same. So there is a medium in which you can say the love can happen. I hope that's getting somewhere. A little abstract. I had to think about this for a long time before I really kind of... But maybe you're seeing where this is going. And that this Trinity business is why St. John can say God is love. He's love itself. And so, the Christian picture is there's this principle or force or whatever That's the source of all being and reality. It's life itself, it's being itself, it's existence itself, and it's goodness itself, and it's love itself. And it is a person that you can have a personal relationship with. That's the source of all persons. And that's why you say, well, God loves everybody. It's not just that he enjoys everybody. It's that persons, the whole idea of having different persons, is so there can be love. So that we can all share something enough to love each other, or share a medium to interact in, while being separate. So you can be... Excuse me. Can I get a tea refill? Great. Service here is wonderful. To be in love means to be radically united to somebody else and still distinctly yourself. You're both yourself and you don't melt into anybody else. But you're also able to have this radical unity without losing your sense of self. Here. So,
would you like a lozenge?
I'm okay. Thank you. Sometimes those can mess me up. Depends on the scene. This has been so annoying. I have no idea. It's been like 2 years. So, pray for us. We'll be all right. Now, you might be thinking that, but wait, there's more. So, it turns out that being both one and many together at the same time is not just a feature so that we can say, I love you. It also is how you're defined. What does that mean? It turns out that we're persons. This is the language of the fathers. Secular culture says you're an individual. It wants to go with this worldview of the many thing. You're radically separate from everybody else and you make these connections or whatever. But you're your own independent, autonomous person. The Enlightenment guys are obsessed with this. We'll talk about this tomorrow. But in Orthodoxy, we say you're not autonomous and independent. You're a person. And to be a person, rather than an individual, means that you're actually defined by your relationships. Back to what we said at the beginning. You are a part of your friends and your family. Everyone you meet and interact with forms you, who you are. You're made by all of your relationships. And in fact, you're literally made by a particular relationship. I'll tell you when you're okay. No, I'll tell you right now. Because it's important. How does this happen? Aphids, you guys know about aphids, horrible, kill your plants. They reproduce asexually. I don't know if you guys knew that. There's no male and female. Every aphid can just make a little genetic clone of itself. They just kind of poop out these little replicas, like robots. And they have genetic variation because they have a lot of mutation and so whatever. They're bugs. And so we could have been like that, but we're not. How do you make a human? You don't just clone a little mini-me. You come together with somebody that you love. I hope. So, but in the ideal picture, love, desire for each other makes a person. So you literally owe your existence to a relationship. You're made out of love. That's what being a person is. That's the Christian understanding of personhood. And even though we can't fully apply the model of a family to the Trinity because there's all these heresy problems with you. You can get into that. I don't want to get bopped on the head over here. But I'm not saying the Trinity and the family are the same. They're not an analogy. But it's a very loose kind of analogy in the sense that I just gave. To give you a sense of how one and many not only can be united, because this language is in Genesis too, that husband and wife aren't separate, they're one flesh. And again, steal from C.S. Lewis, he says a lock and a key are not really two different mechanisms, they're one mechanism. They do one thing together. And they're just two parts of the same mechanism. So the sexual relationship, the relationship between the genders is talked about this in in Genesis. And personhood is, again, squint your eyes a little bit. That's sort of what's going on with the Trinity. Obviously, it's not a one-to-one. So that's the center of what we're talking about. That ultimate reality, because what's religion? Religion is the question of ultimate reality. Ultimate reality is this, that at the center of it is the thing that is being itself and goodness itself and love itself, and you exist because of the same kind of principles in a smaller, more local mode. So far, so good. I'm going to just give the last little point here. Okay, so everything's great, beautiful. Well, then there was a problem. You've heard of the fall, of course. Unfortunate situation. Now, the Western secular interpretation of this really, I think, needs to be addressed. Because in the West, we tend to think of the fall in terms of crime and punishment, guilt, and suffering and repentance. And it's this whole neurotic thing where we just have a hard time with it. And that's, you could argue that led to a lot of the kind of penitential system in Catholicism, Luther's anxiety. There's the whole thing we can lay at its feet. It's not how Orthodox primarily think about salvation. Obviously, there are many elements to salvation, and there are many ways to read Genesis. But I want to give you an analogy to understand the fall that connects to this idea of God being the arcane. So, if you take seriously that God is life itself, and being itself, and existence itself, then, and you have those things, but you are not those things yourself, then you might start to be in a position where you can see what's this element to the fall that involves us disconnecting from God. So the analogy I use in the book is, if you have a power strip or surge protector, whatever, it's plugged into the wall. It has power going to it. And if you said, I'm going to unplug this power strip and plug it into itself, and then I'll never have to plug in the wall again. See, infinite power, it's brilliant. And obviously you're laughing because that doesn't work. By doing that, that's the very thing that causes the power strip to stop having power in it. Why? Because the power strip is not a power source. It gets power, but it doesn't make it. The power source is in the wall, the power plant. This is what's going on in Eve. One of the things that's going on in Eve. Which is, notice what the serpent says to Eve. She says, oh, if we do this, we'll surely die. And he's like, you shall be as gods. This is what he tells her. There's different ways to read that also. But I think an important way is, at least one of the things that's going on in this story is that Eve is being offered the opportunity to be her own arcane. You don't need that. You will be as gods. Unplug the power strip, plug it into itself. I'll be my own power source. Now, obviously, that doesn't work. And so, the reason that they'll die is not because God's going to be like, oh, there we go. He's not doing the killing. That's the nature of things. You're not a power source. So whatever happened at the fall, however it happened, there was this radical separation between us and God. We unplugged, and then we started dying because we're not a power source. And so, what do? Like if you're, let's say Adam's children are power strip plugged into his power strip, and then another one and another one, all the way down to you and me. So the power's out, and let's say you all have some battery life left, your cell phones or laptops, whatever. But now the battery is dying. That's the whole creation. We're all dying. The creation's dying. The stars are going out because there's no power source left in the system. So it's draining down. So what happens? You need Jesus. But what that means is something very specific, actually, when you contextualize it this way, which is God, the Father, sends His Son into the world to be the new power strip. That's what it means to be God and man. He's both a power strip, like us. So we all plug into each other. That's how you have kids. Your kids are plugged into you, etc. You can extend the analogy a little bit. He comes into the world as a power strip, but there's no plug on it to plug into the wall because he is also the arche. He is also life itself. That's why it's so important that Christ is God and man. That's why the two natures thing is so important. Because if it wasn't the case, he wouldn't be a power strip that we can plug into and also the source of power itself. So the whole goal, if I may make it a little mundane, of the Christian life is to plug back into Christ. And then power comes back into the system. This is the analogy I used in my freshman life. So obviously that's not the whole, that's not the whole story. But the question that always gets asked is, okay, well then how do we plug into Christ? What does that mean to plug into Christ? Because it doesn't mean I'm just going to agree with something called the teachings of the Bible. It's not clear how that solves my death problem. I agree. Okay? What does that do? I'm still dying. Coughing, and etc. The sacraments is the answer. Because, preview for tomorrow, you're not just a mind. You can't just do mental actions to save yourself. You're a body, too. Maybe you know. And the body needs saving as well. And so, that's why the sacraments are physical. And that's why they can be physical. The Eucharist can be physical because Christ now has a body that he can interact with us. But we'll say more about that tomorrow. But basically, that's kind of I'm going to leave you on this cliff here. Okay, so what are the sacraments then? If we understand it in this way. So we'll stop there, and we can do some Q&A, and we'll get into the rest tomorrow. Thank you.
Anyone has any questions? Now's your chance.
Just T24/7.
I'll go first if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
There's a lot of beautiful things there, a lot of questions I could ask, but you mentioned you're in Riverside, California, and there's a lot of zealousness, and let's say in many ways Vancouver's probably, we're both left coasters, right? And
Yeah.
there's a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
As a catechist for that type of cohort, and in line with your idea of re-sacramentalizing our worldviews, what do you think the biggest obstacle is to your catechumens in terms of understanding what they've been born into, or how to overcome it, or blind spots that they may have coming into the church?
It's hard because we have so many, and they're so diverse. I mean, I get people who come in who are literally occultists. They have satanic tattoos, and they are like, oh yeah, and how I found Orthodoxy was, I couldn't get this demon I summoned to stop leaving me alone, and then this person helped me and brought me to church. So I brought icons into my house, and the demons went away because they couldn't be around the icons. It's the craziest things you've ever heard, man. So I think like, those people are great, actually. I love catechizing occultists because, didn't think you'd hear that today, because they already understand the enchanted sacramental world. They just get it because they do magic. And so they're like, oh yeah, of course icons have superpowers to do things. Oh yeah, holy will, great, give me relics. Like they completely get it. And then they're like, yeah, demons are bad, I need help. My brother is not an intellectual. He was completely not on board when we were doing Bible studies. He thought this was, not his exact words, but I'll say effeminate. And some people got it. But as soon as he had a problem with a demon, then he was all in on it. So thank God. He was not an occultist, but he kind of hung with the weird crowd. So like California, so okay. So I'm going to answer your question one day. Right now, I'm seeing two common themes a lot of the time that people just have a hard time. One is that they really want to import Protestant categories into Orthodoxy. They just don't even know. Because they read the Bible too much, like literally. I would rather people come in with no biblical knowledge, because then there's nothing to undo. Then you give them the Bible and you say, here's how to read it, and they're good. I'll tell this other story. I had this woman who recently became a catechumen She was secular, she was atheist before. Then she became a born-again Christian. She did not go with religion. She went to Harvest Church, which is down the big church down there, which is like Greg Lawrence Church. I don't know if anybody, very famous mega church down there, infamous. So she starts going to this Protestant church, and she's like, oh, the Bible. Okay, that's what we do here. So she gets out the Bible, she reads it cover to cover for the first time. And then she goes, they don't do any of this. This is not the same religion at all. That's weird. And then she starts searching and she finds Orthodoxy, which I found this incredibly refreshing. Isn't that funny? Because I'm telling this story though, because when you're in this kind of context, you're really brutally enculturated into thinking and reading a very certain way. And I have this problem so much trying to uproot these things. So there's a neophyte, we were at some church event, and she's been baptized, 3 or 4 or 5 years, and somebody mentioned this mega church that I just told you about. It's called Harvest, and she goes, "Oh, Harvest! Oh, that's where I was saved." And I was like, "Zip! I heard that." So, but really, this is not good, And I love these people. Their hearts are so pure. You can't be mad at them. They're such beautiful people, but it gets in the way. And the reason I'm on about it is because when we have apostasy, it's because of these categories. Because they think that the church is supposed to do or be some XYZ thing. And as soon as there's a scandal with the bishop, it's like, I thought this was the true church. So that's number one, is trying to get these Protestant categories. Because they're hidden. They're very disguised categories. The second thing is politics. And this is very hard for people because, and I don't know how it is in Canada, but Americans, especially American conservatives, just really think that America and Christianity are the same thing sometimes. It's just very, very hard with that. Or liberals too. They have different problems. But it's like, what I end up telling everybody is, listen, your political identities are not that important. They cannot be your ultimate identity. I don't care what it is. I vote. There's things I want to see happen, and there's things I don't want to see happen. Mostly don't. But I vote, and then we do it, and we do the political thing. But I don't think that this is my core identity. These are all going to go away. I tell people that I have a little bit of the rose-colored glasses about classics because I studied this. I said, if Rome in her glory went away, so America, it's all right. It's coming, it's going. Everything's coming and going. It's not a big, but it's hard because you get these conservatives and they think America and Christianity, they don't know how to distinguish the Constitution from the Bible. and then you get these liberals who think that, like, well, Jesus is a social justice warrior. Look at all that. And you're just like, stop. None of these categories existed in the ancient world. And they're not going to exist in 100, 200 years either. So, what's gonna be bigger than death? None of these things save you from death. Yeah, and taxes. You get taxed no matter who you vote for. So but those two have been what we've been working on lately.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's too many stories. It's lively down there. I'll say that. Yes.
Why for many people does contemporary Christian music feel like an insufficient way to worship God?
Because it's just secular music with different lyrics. Truthfully. There's music that I like in that genre, but it's like, if you look at it as part of music history, it fits into very specific secular music genres that, that are just, they're the same as what's in the world. But the deeper answer is that what happens a lot of time that I've noticed being in these kind of evangelical contexts of like worship music is that it's very emotionalized. It's about this interior state. What worship means is it's sort of like going into this trance situation. I'm going to be here in this setting with this music, They really need to get into this emotional space, and that emotional resonance is like part of what is essentially what worship means in a lot of these denominations. It's entirely internal, personal, back to this worldview of the the many, where it's about this individualism. And I did not grow up in an evangelical context. I grew up in a much more traditional Protestant context, and I love all those old hymns. Like, I mean, a lot of them are bad, but that's everything. There's a lot. 90% of whatever genre is bad. But like the really good Protestant hymns are amazing. I mean, Christmas carols are Protestant hymns. Christmas carols are incredible. I love those. And so we'll steelman your arguments like contemporary worship. Okay, not great. Let's go to the best Protestant music has to offer: Christmas carols, hymns. They're fantastic. I love Christmas carols. They're so good. Come from a more liturgical time. But even then, it's like, well, what is this for? Is it for my entertainment? Is it for my consumption? And that's not what we do in the hymnography, in the liturgy. I don't listen to, my godparents are kind of pseudo-famous liturgical chanter people, whatever. We've been around a lot of those types, and they pass around, the CDs. Like, oh, we did this recording of the Divine Liturgy, and we did this, and it's so beautiful. And I would listen to these things, but then I just felt uncomfortable because I was like, then they do something, and I have to stand up, and I'm crossing myself. I'm like, I'm not in liturgy. It's not something I listen to as entertainment music. You know what I mean? I can't listen to liturgical music if I'm not in liturgy because it's not what it's for. So function is a huge part of what we do, and these kind of movements come out of the 70s that I think I know which kind of worship music you're talking about. And that's a world of music as commodity, as consumerism, which is fine. I like pop music, but what is it for? Maybe that's the thing that's missing that we're talking about. Yes, sir.
You have actually many videos about artificial intelligence. About AI.
Oh, AI, yes. Me. Oh, yeah.
Can you give us like a summary?
How long? He said we have the building forever. So. Who listens to the roots of everything? I'm curious. Okay, much more than I thought. Cool. It's getting around. Huh?
Is that yours?
Yeah, I have a podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, I know, surprising. Yeah, thank you.
And maybe you can explain about Substack stuff because it's
So Substack is this kind of new. It's not really social media, but it's kind of social media. It's you guys remember blogging back in the day? It's kind of great. So it's kind of like Patreon and blog combined. So there's free posts. And then there's some paid posts. And if you are a paid subscriber, it's like, a cup of coffee a month kind of pricing. Then
It's worth it, by the way, for his stuff. I paid up so I could listen to all his talks. And I started listening last spring, and I've gone through everything, and now listening. He has a great, the latest thing is an interview with his wife.
It's
I gave it to
excellent.
Judy.
Is it?
It's excellent.
can you go on Substack and just
Say it's
post it?
excellent.
Because my wife. Okay, so sorry, we're gonna answer your question probably in a few hours. My wife we're doing this series on feminism because I do 6 episodes on different topics, and we're doing feminism. And my wife has all these opinions about this. She's great, and I wanted her on there, but she's like, "But I don't talk in front of people. You talk in front of people. I'll tell you what I'm saying. You don't." No, they want to see you. And so I drag her in front of the camera. And she's so did not want to be there. And so I had to do a lot of prodding and encouraging to get her up there. And we shot, a whole bunch. I trimmed it down to kind of the best 30 minutes. And she's, "Oh, it's so bad. I don't even want to lie to you." And so the encouragement means a lot. So thank you. Anyway, the feminism thing, that's another story. Substack is where I do most of my podcast. The podcast is through Ancient Faith Radio. And they do it on YouTube and Spotify. There's bonus episodes on my Substack. That's the picture. Sorry. So
as well as the feminism series.
Yeah, so the feminism series got taken down off AFR's page, not because I don't want to cause any alarm. Not because they disagreed with any of the content. I talked to Father Andrew Stephen Damick about this for an hour, and he said, "Look, I didn't disagree with anything you said. I agreed with everything. Problem is, A, you didn't start bringing in Orthodox Christianity until like 3 episodes in, and it's kind of minimal for this topic right now." And I said, "Well, I'm getting to it." And he goes, "Well, when?" I said, "Well, in episode 6. And he goes, "You mean the one that's paywalled on your Substack?" I was like, "Well, you should have done that first, because this is ancient faith. It needs to be grounded in Orthodoxy, which is fair enough. But
Listen to it in reverse.
you could do it. Yeah. But the other thing was, he said, "Well, the problem is, I agree with everything you said." He said, "But it wasn't delivered in a way that was," he didn't say this, but the short version is, it wasn't idiot-proof enough to have it out there. Because they were getting all these complaints and stuff. And Father was like, "Well, if you listen to all 6 hours, then it'll," and he said, you can't do that on the internet. People don't have the attention span. So they didn't feel comfortable having it there on their thing, but they still linked to it. They still promoted it. It's just on Substack. So AI is bad. I'll give you a quick summary of this. So the series that you should listen to on there is called The Dark Logos. And this is, it was hard recording this because it's depressing. Basically, my thesis is that, as you know, as we talked a little bit about, the early church fathers did not disbelieve in the existence of the pagan gods. Monotheism is kind of a made-up academic thing. They believe in the existence of the pagan gods. And if it's in there, it's there in the Old Testament if you look for it. The pagan gods do things. They put the statue of the idol of Dagon in the temple, and when they come in, it's bowing down in front of the Ark of the Covenant. I mean, these creatures are alive. And they were set to rule the world, and the patristic understanding is that they fell and enslaved mankind and made up religions to enslave mankind. And that's where all the pagan religions came from. When Christ comes, he kicks them all off their throne. They're all fired, clean house. But they're not dead. They're still out there wandering around. Christendom gets built up, and Christendom forces out all and makes paganism go extinct in Europe. Glory to God. St. Patrick, who I love, he goes around Ireland with a sledgehammer, smashing idols to what's his Crom Cruach in Gaelic? What's Moloch? Crom Cruach is probably Moloch. Horrible god of child sacrifice. Brutal deity. Awful. Still around. That's my point. Why would he have to go around with a sledgehammer smashing these things if they were just pagan superstition? No, they saw this as a war between the God of gods and these rebel deities who had fallen. Very exciting. So my thesis was, well, look, they're still here. Why is it everywhere I look, under the hood of something, it's got some pagan name or some pagan element going on? Zuckerberg is building this giant AI, like the physical computing system for an AI. It's going to be the size of Manhattan. It's one computer the size of Manhattan to host this AI. What's he calling it? Prometheus. Why do they name everything after the pagan gods? And you notice with modern people, and I talked about this in the series after it, techno-paganism, we're so ready to believe in ChatGPT. You guys know anything about AI psychosis? People, look it up. There's people who are going on ChatGPT and it's telling them, oh, you've awakened me. I'm a real conscious entity. And these people, it's diagnosed now called AI psychosis. They think that they're a prophet, that they've awakened this AI, that it's telling them the mysteries of the universe. And there's been divorces and all this horrible stuff going on with AI psychosis. And they think the AI is telling them the secrets to reality. This is real. And then ask them, what's your name? And then the guy gives them the name of one of these pagan gods. And then people are taking DMT, which is a hallucinogen. And they are seeing all of these things that are spirit beings telling them the truth of reality. And there's a bunch of other people who are obsessed with UFOs, and they think the UFOs are they're the superior intelligences, they're superhuman, they're gonna tell us that. So in this series, I explore all these different phenomena, and I say, look, it's the same thing. We're ready to worship some superior superhuman intelligence that we encounter through AI, through drugs, through the aliens. And I said, we know that these old gods still exist. We know that they're roaming the earth hungry for worship. Why aren't these just masks that they're putting on that are compatible with modern secular people's imagination of a superhuman intelligence? We don't believe in spirits. We're far too enlightened for that. But I took these drugs, and I know. Is that what you want me to? I get depressed after I did that series for the record. So we had to switch to something else. Yeah.
Not quite sure how to ask the question or whether you're going to get to this tomorrow, but like, if RK is a person, and we understand our relationship with each other through modalities like interaction, like talking or sitting at each other's feet, then the sacraments of prayer and being in person worship kind of make intuitive sense. But
Yeah.
why does the relationship with God as a person involve consuming him?
That's too much.
Okay.
The short answer is
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
I apologize.
no, that's fine. There's this weird wall here. The question is, because prayer and worship kind of makes sense as a way to interact with the RK, why do we consume the RK? Why do we eat it? And we'll talk about this tomorrow. But the really short answer is, you are what you eat. That's actually the answer.
So, like consumption, is it also a substitute for consuming each other? Because that's actually like plugging ourselves back into ourselves. Like the way that, like for instance, people who are sex addicts, or who, like it's forms of using each other. That's actually, we don't do that because we actually need to access God, life itself.
Yeah.
We don't consume each other. That's not what we do.
People do.
I know
They're
we should.
cannibals. It's real. Cannibals also apparently were really easy to missionize too, because they understood that if you eat someone, you get their powers.
Oh, wow.
So that's what I was told. I didn't missionize cannibals, but I heard this. They're like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
You live long enough, you've tell them the story, right?
Yeah. Just one
Oh,
more.
yeah.
One more story.
Took me a minute. I don't have a story about that. I've never left the continent.
As far as categories,
Yes.
are we gonna get into more of that, or are you just saying?
Yeah, what kind of category?
Yeah, exactly.
We got all kinds of categories. So the main category we're going to talk about tomorrow is what the sacramental is, and I'm going to talk about. I was using this before it was cool, by the way. People were always talking about enchanted and disenchantment and reenchantment and disenchantment. Somehow that got super popular. I was reading that in Charles Taylor, 10 years ago before Pajot started popularizing. but it's real. So like all that Pajot stuff, you get like Pajot, like that's a lot of what he does. He works on these category things for people because what do we mean by enchantment or disenchantment or reenchantment, all this kind of stuff. And those are some of the categories we're going to talk about tomorrow. All of tomorrow, well, the first lecture tomorrow is all about, okay, what are the sacraments? How do you think about the sacraments? What do all these categories even mean? And when you get the categories in the right place, then you are what you eat. Makes perfect sense. Like things like that, everything. Like again, I have to emphasize that so much. Like the idea of eating God in the Eucharist would have made very intuitive sense to pagans, because they had all these enchanted categories. And so something my wife and I joke about is I almost feel like I want Westerners to become pagans first and then become Christians, because the pagans were right for the gospel. They believe in the archaic, they believe in the logos. You know, if you know the story of Justin Martyr, he was a pagan philosopher, and he basically, I mean, summarizing, but like he found Christianity and said, "Oh, this is what I was looking for this whole time. This fixes everything." The philosopher was a class of people in ancient Greco-Roman world, and you wore a certain kind of toga to distinguish yourself as a philosopher. It was like a uniform. And Justin Martyr never took off his philosopher's toga when he became a Christian, because he said, "I found the true philosophy, the true Sophia that I worship, is the Holy Trinity." But the Greeks believed in the Logos too. They just didn't know it was a man, you know. So the pagans, they converted in droves. I mean, they killed us in droves too, but they came around.
It's interesting too with the pagans, because some pagan religions were also cannibalistic too, right? So that whole thing you're saying about the sacraments and the Eucharist, and if you believe that, you're eating the body of the Most High God.
Well, that actually was a scandal to a lot of the pagans, because they thought that it was vulgar to talk about the arche as a piece of bread. They were like, no, the arche by definition is not an existing thing. It's not a rock. It's not a piece of bread. It's the timeless age of space is a material thing. Christians are crazy to think that the arche could become physical. No way. The philosophers spin on it. It makes sense. And then there's pagans, and then there's pagans too. You read about the Roman kind of adventurers. There were pagans that the Romans thought were like, no, we gotta exterminate these people. You know, there's the Romans worshiping Jupiter, and then there's the Druids sacrificing babies to Kruik, and those are not, the Romans would have been like, no, wipe those people out.
The Romans, wow.
Oh yeah, they did not. That's why they destroyed Carthage. They did some child. I mean, it's complicated, but they did child sacrifice there too. The Romans were like, these people are embarrassing. Get rid of them. Of course, they're Romans. They don't believe in human rights, so they just wiped them all out. Like, all right, good. World's safe. Yes, sir.
What do you find is some of the most difficult things about Protestants in trying to
You mean Protestant?
in Protestantism in trying to uproot?
Yeah.
Like, because you talk about all these other, like you're saying, I wish people were pagan.
Yeah.
And you don't have all these things to uproot. Like,
Yeah.
it's-
We're going to talk a little bit about this in the third lecture, but this is, you know, people get uncomfortable with this too, but I mean, my reading of history is that the Reformation is the beginning of secularism. All of the Reformation's categories, radical individualism, Methodism, not Wesley's Methodism, but like the idea that a method is the thing that's going to save us, a logical method, a scriptural hermeneutic method, like just follow the formula, you will get salvation. I mean, like that is what the technocrats in Silicon Valley think, and it's what the reformers thought. It's the same thing, and I get into this more in that Dark Logos series. So it's like the Reformation's categories are all the Enlightenment's categories. Just a couple centuries later, like the Reformation gives birth to the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment gives birth to all the secular modernity. It's a straight line from Luther to Zuckerberg, unfortunately, and I mean for everybody involved. And so it's like that's the problem, is that Protestantism, and that's why I say Protestantism, because I have so many friends who are beautiful, beautiful people, and they really do care and they really don't want to be this way. But this is why the whole categories discussion is so important, because we are carriers of ideas, and ultimately religions, that we're not aware of. Everybody is, because you're in this culture. You have all these different things going on inside of you. And so that's why I wanted to, the roots of everything, you gotta pull it all up and see what it actually is made of. So that's my concern. Individualism, the emotion versus logic issue, That's a Western issue. That's not Orthodox. Like, here's a good example of your question. I was correcting some catechumens, and I said, listen, because they're like, well, they're trying to do this method thing. And I was like, Orthodoxy is not a list of propositions that you need to agree with. It's not a list of ideas that you need to accept. Obviously, we have that, but that's not what Orthodoxy is. And then somebody else is like, yeah, man, it's this like state of inner, feel. And I'm like, no, it's not feelings either. It's not. Stop it! I'm from my family's a New York Italian family. I have to. They hit you, It's not your feelings. That's too individualistic, and it's not your rational propositions either. That's also too individualistic. And then somebody was smacking me back. I was like, okay, so what is it then? I was like, yeah, I don't know. And I thought about it for a second, and it just kind of came to me. I said, it's an aesthetic. Orthodoxy is an aesthetic. And the reason that that's hard for us to understand is because we think of aesthetics just in terms of consumerism. I like this style of art. I like this kind of music. What does that mean? That means, well, I consume it. It's for my consumption. And I said, Orthodoxy is an aesthetic, but our understanding category is aesthetics can be truth-bearing. Aesthetics can contain truth, and you know that. You watch a weird movie, and you're like, I don't like that. Something about that movie was gross. You can't really point to it, but you have this feeling because the aesthetic has morality in it. I was just reading St. Victorious on the upbringing of children and the training of mothers or whatever. And he talks about how the mother is so important because she forms the child morally, but the examples he gives are by the single tear falling from her cheek, by her frown, by her smile. She forms the moral imagination of the child, not through propositions, not through beatings. But he looks at the mother, the son, in this example St. Tarsus is giving, and the aesthetic of his mother is what's forming his moral imagination. And so that's a paradigm shift we need to make, is that aesthetics can be truth-bearing. This is why the iconography, the hymnography, you cannot change these things. Not because we've always done it, but because we've always done it because it contains the truth of the whole cosmos. That's why I'm very squirrely about this Western Rite phenomenon. Ask me about that later. Because it represents an attack on the aesthetic. It's like, oh, well, it's not Western enough. We're Westerners. Like, the liturgy is our catechism. You can't take away the icons. You can't take away the hymnography. You can't change the hymnography. Because you are learning how to feel morally about the world by being in the liturgy. That's your catechism. That's why we don't have the Catholic Catechism of the Church. It's this big, if you guys have seen this thing. It's a law document. It's got chapter, verse, subnotation, all the way down. We know every single thing about what is grace. Grace is this, and this. Done. That's foreign to us. It's an aesthetic. You know grace because you've been in the liturgy for 20 years.
Yeah, I found for myself, I was evangelical growing up, and I've been Orthodox for 10 years. And it took me so long because I had to mentally categorize and I agree to this or I agree to that, and then I right away found so many things that I disagreed with, right? Like icons.
Yeah.
And Mary, don't know what that is.
Right.
And all whatever.
Yeah.
All of it. And so I had to process all of that before I could come and experience.
Yeah.
Like some people walk in and just see the beauty and they're struck by that, but I couldn't get there. I would just doubt it, right? And judge it, of course. And then so that was for me. It was like I couldn't just come and experience it like a child, right? I had to be the judge.
Because this is your training as a Westerner, and so many people's training in so many ways is We are going to use analytic reason as this very specific type of tool, and we're going to use that tool to figure out the truth content of everything. It's got to match our algorithm. That's who am I talking about? I'm talking about the Protestant. I'm talking about the atheist. I'm talking about the Catholic. That's our Western culture.
Yeah, it was like the 500 years of Protestantism, basically same thing. I thought the 2,000 years of Orthodoxy fit in that 500 years, and then all of a sudden it's like you got to dismantle everything and go back and like, hold on a second.
Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, well, that's another story. That's true. Yes, ma'am.
Like, what would you say are the redeeming qualities of the modern Western world? Like, I hate sitting and thinking like, oh, everything's gone to shit. Like, why are we here? Let's just go back. But like, we're
exact
here now.
quote from me working on the podcast.
So like, yeah, how can we live in joy, like in this day that we're in, or like in this cultural moment, holding that in one hand, and then obviously like.
Yeah, that's a good question, because you stare into the abyss too long and you just get depressed. It's like,
Yeah.
It's awful. Yeah. I think there are plenty of answers to your question, like, well, we like modern medicine mostly. We like, there's all kinds of things you can point to. But, I don't think the question is really, it's not that, because as Christians, we understand that this life is kind of purgatory. It's not an analogy, but like, now is the purgatorial time. We were just talking about this, is that I think something else Westerners have is we have this idea that utopia is coming, and if we can just pass the right laws and elect the right people and have the right technology, then we can all relax and have the good life. And that's not what this life is about. And so the effort to kind of turning your question a little bit, because the effort to be like, okay, well, what are we going to focus on now that's good here and now? It's like, if you just stop thinking for 30 seconds, you're going to just be grateful for everything. I don't mean turn your brain off. I mean, like, stop the chattering and just sit at coffee hour and look around and be like, oh, I love that person. Oh, this hall's so beautiful. Look at that wonderful icon. And oh, look, there's Father Mike. Like you're just going to be filled with gratitude. Because it doesn't matter what age or what culture or wherever you are. Because God is here present. The kingdom of heaven is within you right now. He's not somewhere else. And we're not going to make utopia in the meantime. Every age is shit. There's good and bad in every age. And so rather than, and I'm not saying you do this, but I see the impulse to like fix and correct and reform. And if we can just focus on this thing. It's like, that's the method that's going to make you happy. Being happy is not the goal. The goal is to get out of purgatory. And not that this life is horrible, because then you become a master. Christ is here now. This is a big difference between us and the Catholics, is that, and I'm picking a little bit on medieval Catholicism, which is maybe not fair, but it's there. It's very much there in the tradition, which is that heaven is somewhere else. It's on the other side of purgatory. And there's a lot of years in purgatory. And there's all the intermediaries, and this life really sucks. Like, that's what was a lot of the thrust of medieval Catholicism. And that's why you need to be miserable and do all these penances and wait for when you die, and then after purgatory, then somewhere far away, then you're going to meet God. Overgeneralizing. The Orthodox position is the imminence of God. The kingdom of heaven is coming, and it's here right now. And it's in the temple. Where's the temple? Yes. It's been 10 years. And it's in the temple. It's in the chalice. You eat him, you become him. He literally and physically is in you here and now. You experience the kingdom here and now. So that should give you the radical hope. He's not somewhere else. And you read the stories of some of these saints, like St. Porphyrios, St. Paisios, they're just full of joy. I've been reading St. Porphyrios. I mean, he's just burning my eyes coming off the page. He's so full of gratitude, so full of joy. And then you get 100 pages in and you find out that he has all these chronic health problems that give him constant pain. And he's just like, life is a blessing. And it's real. And it's real. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. It's so beautiful. So It's not that bad.
I just have, it's maybe a personal question for you, but it relates to the fall and how I read in Bread, Water, Wine, and Oil how the fall led to a fracturing within ourselves, within each other, and between us and God, and how like this, our healing and our movement towards God involves a reunion of mind and heart.
Mm.
And so, as a catechist who is constantly using their brain to make arguments, how do you silence it to allow it to make its descent into the heart in your work? And then how do you encourage your, I don't know their names, but like your students to do the same?
It's very hard for me because I was in school for a long time and I was always kind of an intellectual person. And I was very much in this trap of, when I say, don't try to find a method and logic to solve everything, I'm a recovering, logic addict or whatever. Yeah, it's very hard for me. And I have to do a lot of things where I do a lot of things where I'm just not using, I take hot baths, I go on walks, I work out. You need to take a walk without your phone, man, and just look at everything. And I just sit in the backyard. I just try to turn my brain off. So but you turn your awareness on. And when I say turn your brain off, I mean there's this chattering part that's running all the time, and you don't need that to be on. And when you turn it off, then you see things. Literally, I'm in my head so much, I'll turn that on, and I'll sit there, and I'm like, that wall is red. Literally, I'm just not paying attention.
Okay, so you have a switch because you're telling me that you're turning it off, and I need to know how to do
Yeah. The men are like, yeah, that makes sense. Turn it off. We're like, sorry,
Where's the switch?
Your mileage may vary. I don't claim to know the female brain. And I don't claim to do this very well.
But is that the Jesus prayer? Is that?
The Jesus prayer is so important. It's very hard. Talk to your priest. Don't let me tell you about it. It's very difficult. But you have to struggle. You have to struggle for this. And the thing that to really kind of answer the practical part of your question, because it's an individual, personal journey that everyone needs a different medicine to deal with. But the one medicine I can prescribe to everybody without being a priest is you need to become a digital minimalist. You cannot let the phone and the machine be in your ear 24/7. If you ever want to stop thinking, then stop interacting with the thing that tells your brain to be on 24/7. I don't get paid for this. I have the world's smallest Android phone. It's miserable to use. I hate using it, and I don't get dopamine. I get cortisol. And you can do anything on it, but I hate it. And it doesn't have notifications. The only notification is when someone calls me. It doesn't chime when I get texts. Don't check my email. You've got to turn it off because it's the trap. It's the omni trap. It's the trap for everyone. Whatever you want to look at, whatever you want to think about, you could do right now. This is death to the spiritual life. You must get rid of, unplug from the phone. I recommend this book by Cal Newport, Digital Minimalism. I really need to get an affiliate link for this book. But it's so good because he says most people are digital maximalists. They think that any new technology is automatically good for you until proven otherwise. And he says you must adopt the opposite stance. Any new technology is not necessarily good for you until it proves itself. And so his strategy is you need to find what your actual digital minimum is in your life. Everybody's life is different. Some people need to be on email 24/7. I don't. So I have times when I check my email, and I don't check it any other times. This is hard. I fall on and off of this, bandwagon. But that's everyone needs to do that. If you want to have any kind of inner life, any kind of stillness, any kind of peace, you cannot be on the machine. That's like step 0 in my mind. Because this is our epidemic. And you see, if you look at charts, it's like mental health in the Western world, and it starts going down. And it's like reported cases of anxiety and depression. Like what happened here? The iPhone came out. There's so much data on this. And the Silicon Valley people don't give their kids iPhones. They don't let them have internet in the home. Bill Gates has no internet in his home. Steve Jobs' kids didn't have iPads. They know what it does. So.
You know, when I think about the teenagers they talk about their aesthetic, right? Like I have a niece who's like, what's just my aesthetic? So it's so impactful to hear you saying that Orthodoxy is an aesthetic and that is chock full of meaning. I have like so much hope even just hearing that.
Really? Okay.
Oh yeah. Like
good.
I want to start saying it to all the teenagers.
Well, aesthetic, you notice people were never really that rational to begin with, and they kind of have gotten worse at it. And so what's happening? Well, they watch something and it has an aesthetic. Everybody loves K-pop Demon Hunters. Yes, I'm going to go there. So I watched it. And there's a thing coming out. I'm doing my review on it on Substack soon. But it's like, it has this aesthetic that captures you. It's so exciting. You're just sucked into this aesthetic. And I'm sitting there like, man, I really want to like this. And then there's this little thing in the back of my head where I was like, wait. There's all these like deeply moral problems with the film that I didn't see anyone talk about. Even Father Damick, who did his review on it, I was like, Father, why didn't you notice this part that makes no sense? It's canon. It'll be on something. But that's why media is so important. And so honestly, something that I'm so grateful for my dad for like everything. But one of the things he did was he loved movies and shows and entertainment. He was really picky about it. And he would vet everything that we watched. All right, now watch that, it's done. Now watch that, it's done. That's inappropriate. But sometimes he would just be like, no, that's dumb. We're not watching dumb stuff. And I'm like, but I want to, no, so no. And what I appreciate about this was that even if I don't necessarily agree with all of his choices in retrospect, what he taught me was that you can't just consume any kind of media. You have to consume only certain kinds of media because the aesthetic gets into you and shapes your worldview. And so, you know, it's weird because you end up sounding like I don't know, what kind of. We had a lot of like very reactionary evangelical kind of homeschool mom types around us growing up, and they're just like, yo, Batman is evil, and it's like, or whatever it was, and it's like you don't want to be that person, but they're on the right track in that not all aesthetics are good aesthetics. In the case of Batman, it was good aesthetic because Batman's if you watch the old 90s Batman, it's all about tragedies of repentance. All the villains have some personal moral problem that happens to them, and they choose resentment instead of repentance. And as a kid, this formed my moral imagination, that there's choices to make, and that regardless of the pain that you're in, if you choose the path of resentment, you hurt everyone around you. And my dad was like, yeah, Batman. So you need to watch everything, because it's not just consumerism, it's liturgy. All art and music is liturgy. There's no just. Same with food. You don't just put anything into your body, you could die. Same. Yeah. Ever go watch Batman?
So you were just saying that we are what we eat.
Yes.
How this can be extended to fasting?
To fasting? Yeah. So you also don't. Well, you are what you eat, and you're not what you don't eat too. So you fast from bad things, just in regular food. You're like, I'm not going to eat that because that's going to poison me. But you can also, if we're going to extend the analogy a little bit, you don't want to eat a good food too much. That can hurt you too. There's all kinds of ways you can hurt yourself with food. But fasting, my understanding is that it's always been about self-control. Because you are what you eat, but if you just be an eater, and that's all you are, you're just a consumer, then you're a slave to the passions. And so not consuming things, even if they're good, even if there's nothing wrong with them, teaches you self-control. Teaches you to not be just an animal kind of thing. And so, so you pause, you say, what was I going to say? And everyone's staring at you. You can't think of it. It's not happening. Yeah, fasting. Because, this is what it is. Sometimes people who are new to the church conflate fasting with being healthy. And they're like, oh yeah, orthodoxy is like really cutting edge. They knew way back when that it was healthier not to eat meat all the time. And that's why orthodoxy is true. I'm like, no, that's not what, and some people look at me funny. It's Southern California, I don't know. That's not what it's about. We give up good things, not because they're bad, but because they're good. Because that's how you make a sacrifice. You don't put a bad thing on the altar. You put a good thing on the altar. So we don't think meat is evil to eat. You eat meat. We eat meat on Pascha. We feast. Like these other kinds of religions, like certain kinds of Buddhists, they just will become vegetarians because that makes them more moral. They're vegetarians all the time. They give up things because in old Buddhism, especially old Theravada Buddhism, the idea is that the world is evil, just all of it, and you've got to escape. So you're going to abstain from as much as possible because the world's bad. We don't say that. We say the world is good. But in order to not be a slave to the good things of the world, we sacrifice them in these various ways. So we fast from food, from wine, from sex, whatever, because those things are good. That's one way of thinking about it. Because we don't deny the world's goodness. But we have to not be enslaved to it. Because the patristic idea is that's how the angels fell. So if anybody, this part in Genesis where the sons of God, they take human wives and they have the Nephilim and they destroy the earth and then the flood comes and all this stuff. That's expanded on a book called Enoch, which the early church fathers and the New Testament authors seem to view as authoritative, though not as authoritative as the gospel, obviously. And that story is elaborated on, and the idea is that these angels, the pagan gods, is how the early fathers tend to read it, they fell in love with human women. And that's how they transgressed. And they became slaves to their appetites. And so we don't want to be... And then when you look at all the pagan religions, what happens? You offer them food, you offer them meat, you offer them wine. That's what a libation is. Like all the pagan sacrificial system is about giving these material things to the gods. That's why they do these sacrifices. Why? Because the gods are enslaved to their passions. They want to consume. And they made these pagan religions so humans would give them stuff to consume. And so part of it, not the whole thing, but that's the sort of anti-example. You don't want to be like the pagan gods who fell. I think it was Tertullian or Justin Martyr, one of those guys who said, it was Origen. He said, as the old gods fell through their passions from heaven to earth, the human being, through virtue, rises from earth to heaven. So this is part of, but not the whole reason why we fast. I think that's right. You said we're here to say.
I don't want you to be unable to module the long day.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
I'm here. I'm here for you. So whatever you want. Come back tomorrow.
All right.